So, Sherrick, welcome to Couch Conversations. I've obviously only just met you for the first time on camera now.
Yeah.
But tell me a little bit about yourself and the viewers who've been watching this show. Tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are and what you do.
Okay. My name is Sherrick O'Quinn. I am 32 years old and I am based in Los Angeles, California. Born and raised in the U.S. I was raised mostly in Kentucky.
Okay.
So most of my family's from the South. And now I'm currently an actor, also a minister. So that's part of my backstory. And I was raised in Kentucky. I'm the oldest of three. So
okay.
Have a younger brother, younger sister. Awesome mom who's been awesome part of my journey and I guess the legacy that I'm writing right now.
Yeah.
And started there. Also an actor, professional actor. And
you graduated, didn't you, with your master's? Was it last year?
No, it was actually May 15th of this year.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah, I am fresh out of graduate school. A Master of Fine Arts in acting. So I got that at the University of Southern California. So amazing. I am super excited to have that finished now because it's been an awesome journey, and I feel like I've checked off a big part of the acting journey that I really was excited for.
Yeah. And so what is it like in LA? Obviously, you're an acting hub, lots of beautiful people around, and obviously talking about agents and things like that. How easy or hard has it been for you to find work and to obviously, people have different versions of what LA is like. So tell us from your point of view, what is LA like and how have you found it in terms of the acting industry?
Well, first of all, I want to preface anything that I say with, I think you're always in a good position when God's going before you. And I can honestly say that every step of the way, God has been here and he's consistently affirmed that I'm in the right place at the right time, in the right season of my life. And so in that way, I can definitely say I've seen a lot of grace just in how things have unfolded. Seriously, my first 2 years, it'll be 3 years in August that I've been here. And my first 2 years, like every day it was still surreal that I was here in Los Angeles, because as an actor and with my ambitions, for what I want to do with my career, I always envisioned being in Los Angeles. So it's like to wake up and I'm here in Los Angeles pursuing my acting goal and being in this place of opportunity has just been so surreal. It's very gratifying to know that I'm here and I've really been at peace, with being here. It had the most contentment that I've had ever, especially professionally, because I was an educator at one point in time. I worked in customer service doing some things before I finally, transitioned and said, okay, hey, this is the thing I want to chase and pursue. And it's been awesome. But Los Angeles as a city is amazing. It's really dynamic, really vibrant. I love the pace of the city and I love there's so many different ethnicities. So there's so much diversity here. I mean, it's kind of cool because it reminds me of different places. In ways, it reminds me of New York. Okay. But then there are aspects, with the pace but then other ways it kind of reminds me a little bit of place that I've been to, like when I was in Ghana. There's something I guess I guess an example is like in my neighborhood, like it's common to see like fruit vendors, pushing their trolleys, their little trolleys down, selling, fresh fruit and snacks and stuff like that. And that's not that. And I remember like how much I enjoyed that, like when I was studying abroad in undergrad in Ghana, and seeing that in a culture that was totally different from mine. So it's like to be able to see that here and go into different communities, and that community is totally different from this other community, whether it's Koreatown or whether you're going to Filipino town or all the various Latino communities. It's just awesome. And then on top of that, it's like it's palm trees and sunshine, you know, most days. I feel like it's easy to have a great day when you wake up and it's green and beautiful outside and sunny. So I've really enjoyed my stay here so far. And not to say that I haven't had ups and downs, you know, because you still always have a journey, you know.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
If I'm going to have it anywhere,
it's a good place to have it.
Yeah,
with palm trees, right?
Yeah, you know, yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Obviously, I mean, that's so amazing to hear that obviously you're in LA and, you know, you're following God's call in your life, which is obviously really important. But obviously, life hasn't always been easy. So tell us a little bit about how you came to faith and, you know, have you always been a Christian? You know, were you born into a Christian family? Or some people say, you know, from the cradle. So are you know, tell us a little bit about, you know, your kind of Christian journey.
Mm-hmm. My mom and my dad were both Christians. It was, stepdad, I should say stepdad, because I was raised by my stepdad for the bulk of my youth, probably up until like high school, before they separated. I've actually never met my real father, and that's my biological father, and that's very much a part of my journey, spiritually and personally. But my stepfather and my mom both were Christians, and my stepdad would make sure me and my little brother went to church every Sunday when I was young. So I started going in grade school, maybe about, I don't know, maybe about third grade was when I remember starting to go, and I got baptized in the fourth grade. I remember riding on the church van every Sunday, going to church, had a lot of fun memories, you know, with that driver, you know, one of our ministers, Brother Richie, and the kids on the bus. Did vacation Bible school. I sung in the choir. So I was involved as a youth, all the way up to probably about when I was in the sixth grade, so maybe about 12, maybe at 11, I guess, 11 or 12.
Yeah.
And my family moved, and when we moved, we didn't go as frequently. My brother and I still kind of went, but we didn't go as frequently. But eventually, we kind of tapered off of going, and but it was interesting that I think God had really gotten his hold on me, you know, at an early age, because even though I wasn't going to church, like it's so interesting. I used to pray. I still prayed like pretty regularly. And I remember as a kid, like I would pray for like an hour or more, like as a kid. And it was just interesting. But
wow.
So that was me. So I always kind of had some type of connection. Like I had some type of connection to God, even though I wasn't like in the church as I was as a youth. And so I had this time frame where I wasn't in the church all the way up through undergrad and college. And then around my senior year, my girlfriend at the time was Catholic. She had started going to a lot of Catholic services a lot more. And I had also started this actually, I think with the help of your aunt, Daksha, and this intercultural club on campus. We'd started this tutoring group at a local Baptist church. And so I think it was a combination of those two influences and this tug from God, you know, on me that kind of led me to recommit my life to Christ. Because when I graduated from undergrad, I just felt like something was missing. I couldn't pinpoint it, but I just felt like there was
a hole in your life. There was something.
Yeah. And I think because I had people, you know, I have an aunt that is a pastor. My great grandmother was a preacher and a minister, and I had those people. And I think just because of the experiences I had as a youth, had kind of influenced me and put me in God's, you know, orbit. So I think he was able to kind of lead me that way. And so after undergrad, I made a commitment to myself. I was like, I'm going to recommit my life to you. It's like, I don't know where to start. I was like, I have no idea where to start. I was like, all I know is that I can go to church. So I was like, let's do that. Let's make a commitment. Let's find a church. When I got out of undergrad, I went back to Kentucky. I'd been going to school in Wisconsin, 6 hours away.
Wow.
And So when I came back, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to miss church. I'm going to go every Sunday. And I found this really awesome church. And I just remember like maybe the first time I went, my pastor, Damian Thompson at this church, who's been instrumental in my growth as a Christian, he really spoke to me. And the church was so welcoming and warming. And I was just like, I think this is where I need to be and where I need to be to grow. But I didn't join the church. And then that second time I was like, I need to join this church. So I joined that church, and then I started going to church every Sunday. I didn't know what to do, you know. It's just interesting when I look back on how the journey started, because I remember there's so many times like I'd be in Sunday school and like feeling like, you know, so humble because people be talking about Bible stories, and I was like, I don't understand this. Or I remember like struggling, you know, trying to be consistent reading my Bible and not understanding things. And when I first started, I would get to church late. You know, I'd get to church like I'd make it, but I'd kind of be late. And then getting in the process of actually getting there on time, and then getting up early.
You got there. That's the main thing. You got there.
Yeah, you know, so it's just like seeing all these changes. So fast forward, you know, I just kept getting more and more entrenched. Next thing you know, I'm singing choir because I love singing choir as a kid. And then I'm helping, you know, as an assistant for a Sunday school class. And then a few years into the thing, you know, I accept the call to ministry. And then I'm preaching, you know, at this church, and I'm teaching, you know, adults and teens, and preaching for the adult congregation. So it was this amazing journey, you know, over this span of years.
Wow, it's so amazing, isn't it? Because like going to ministry is such a call, you know, from God, but also our purpose may be the same, but the assignments may be many. And that's something I learned myself only in the last like 6 to 12 months, really. Someone said to me, your purpose is the same, but your assignments may be many. I'm like, what? You know? So it's really lovely to kind of share, you know, hear your testimony. And actually, now that you've gone from, you know, education, you know, ministering, and actually now going to, you know, being an actor and, you know, living in LA, and, you know, because, you know, everyone needs Jesus, you know, everyone needs to hear the gospel, and whatever platform that's on, it's so important to be able to kind of share that. So, wow. So listening to that, and obviously we've spoken a little bit before this anyway. Obviously the last 2 weeks has been a lot of stuff that's happened. Obviously we're dealing with, you know, the pandemic of the virus, which has been, you know, keeping us all, I'd say busy, but busy in a different way. I guess more soul searching and trying to find out, you know, what is God doing? But also naturally what's been really tough is obviously George Floyd's death and what's been going on. And obviously you're born and raised in the US. So it'd just be really lovely to hear from you, from your experiences, you know, anything that you've experienced, you know, what has it been like growing up, you know, as a young Black male in the US? I mean, the UK is different, and I know the US it's a wonderful country in many ways, but there's a lot of, I'd say there's a lot of orthodox thinking as well, you know, in some ways. So tell us a little bit about that journey. How did you feel, like, obviously seeing that video, but also how has it resonated with you as a you know, as a young Black male?
This whole season has been interesting because I think now that I'm having, because I think when everything started kind of unfolding, and actually I want to mention that one of the people that passed in you know, in some of these police confrontations was Breonna Taylor. She's actually from my hometown. She's from Louisville, Kentucky. That's where I was raised.
Okay.
So it's been kind of interesting because I feel like now I have a little more perspective, and I think when I'm looking down at it, I'm seeing, you know, that I think a lot of this stuff is coming up because it has to, in order for us to really be able to deal and grapple. Because I think there has to be exposure and revelation of these things, you know.
There has to be light in the darkness. Yeah, you
know, and in order for us to see, okay, in order for us to have transparency about what's really underneath the surface of what needs to be dealt with. And when things first started, I think initially it's always, the outrage and the questioning, of why these things happening. And I've had a difference of emotions. Sometimes I've had emotion, this feeling of not knowing what to do and not knowing what I should be doing as a Black person.
Yeah.
Am I supposed to be going and protesting as an agent of change? Do I need to be, talking to people, and I think as I've kind of gone through what's been going on and reflecting on my own experiences, I think there's been this desire to really be seen. And I think that was one thing that actually prompted me to go to my first protest. I'd never been to a protest until this season of time.
I remember messaging you going, "Are you all right?"
Yeah. And I had a lot of people saying that. And I remember I had been watching the news and just thinking about things, and really, because I feel like there is a responsibility, but it's at the same time, it's like, is there a burden for me to go, and what, like, I feel like there's a grappling with that, and I was just like, what am I supposed to be doing? And I just started thinking about like how many oftentimes it seems so simple, I think, to other people, but I remember as a Black man being on campus at my university and in the world, like how many times I thought about walking down the sidewalk and questioning what people think of me as I move past them. And something as simple as people shifting on the sidewalk when they move past me, or moving out of the way and moving to the opposite side of the sidewalk. There's so many times where I wonder, like, are they moving because I'm just in the way, or, are they moving because of safety reasons? Are they moving because I'm Black and there's this idea of who I could be, or there's this unconscious bias, or stereotyping, because I'm a 6'4" Black man, walking down the sidewalk. And I remember a lot of times that bothered me, and it bothered me because I feel like that's a question that a lot of other people from other backgrounds and experiences don't have to ask. They don't wonder that, or after Ahmaud Arbery was shot, I was running through a neighborhood, with a lot of nice homes, that I don't typically run through. And I remember in the back of my mind, thinking, there was this slight apprehension, could someone, be seeing me run through the neighborhood and thinking that I'm running through the neighborhood trying to case their homes or something, to burglarize the homes, and so that's a very real reality, I think. As a Black person, whenever I go into communities or different spaces where I'm not in the majority, or where the people I feel like are a different crust for me, I wonder, like, how will I be perceived, and so it's been good. I think it's been good for me to have to confront these things and really consider my experience more. But I'm really just blown away right now by the amount of solidarity and unity that I'm seeing right now, coming up because of everything that's going on. And it's just, I think just this time in general, has just been amazing, because you have the pandemic, you have all these things going on politically, I think in your country and our country as well,
Yeah.
And then you have these matters of social, equality that are coming up, and I'm just glad to see that people are unifying. And when I went to my protest, I was surrounded by so many people that didn't look like me, whether Latino or Asian or white. There are Black people, of course, and actually I was in the minority as a Black person in the group. And it was just amazing to be in that group and feel so empowered, to be supported and affirmed. And I remember chanting Breonna Taylor's name and Ahmaud Arbery's name and George Floyd's name, and just feeling empowered and feeling as if I was part of something bigger than me. Yeah, and change. And I remember feeling chills going through that. And it was such a day, because I remember when we started, I was really apprehensive, going. And then I remember when I got there, You know, there were National Guardsmen where we were, because I was in downtown LA, and there'd been looting, you know, previously in the day. So they had people from the National Guard and from the police there. And so you're seeing National Guardsmen in fatigues with guns, you know, and police.
It's scary.
Yeah, it's very scary, especially as a Black person, as a Black man, and not knowing, you know, what's going to happen. And then you also don't know in this situation, I think. And I'm very grateful that a lot of the protests have been peaceful, and people, I think, are starting to really see that looting and doing things that are counterproductive are undermining what we're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you say being in LA, obviously there's so much diversity there.
Yeah.
Do you see a massive difference in terms of how people approach you in LA versus in Kentucky? Like, do you feel like there's a world of difference, or would you say that it's similar, the sentiment underlying is still the same?
That's a good question. I would guess it's similar. It's a really hard question. It's a really good question.
Sorry,
No.
Because the thing is, I've been to the US. Obviously, I've been to Wisconsin. You know, we've been to Minnesota, and we've driven Dakshanti and myself and Bella. We've driven from Wisconsin, you know, all the way down to Florida. And when you're driving through the Midwest, it's just a very different, because it's just farms, you know, it's literally just fields everywhere. And I'm not, you know, I can understand why, and I don't mean I'm giving people a pass for why they think the way they do, because I think there's no room for ignorance. You know, ultimately, we all are, you know, accountable for ourselves. But I could understand why people voted for Trump if they did in the Midwest, because if their only form of education is TV and it's, you know, a biased news channel, then that's what you're feeding yourself with. And we know as Christians that whatever you listen to, whatever you read, whatever you hear, you absorb everything. And that's why it's so important to protect our spirit. And that kind of gave me a bit of insight. I remember we stopped at, I think it was in Georgia, we stopped at the service station. And we went into the service station, and I saw these really beautiful wooden crosses, you know, that you could buy. And I started looking further down this aisle, not even aisle, but like a stand. And I got to the bottom of it, and I was so angry because they'd engraved a gun on the cross. And I was just like, I just didn't know what to say, because I was just fuming. I was like, at what point did Jesus use any kind of weapon apart from the word of God? Do you know what I mean? And I think that's why I'm asking, because actually, if you go to New York, yes, it's a multicultural city, but just looking at what's on the news, and obviously it's different to living in New York and what you see on the news, because you only get to see a snippet. But if the NYPD are acting the way that they are, you know, and even that's a multicultural thing, you know, multicultural kind of city, well, then how does that impact LA? And LA is very different to, I've never been to the West Side, so that's my goal.
West Coast,
but I assume that because it is quite laid back in terms of how it is, actually, you know, is there really a difference? You know, apart from the fact there's palm trees and it's nice weather and it's more multicultural, but actually, is there still prejudice and discrimination, which I think there will be anywhere anyway. But have you noticed, do you feel, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, do you feel safer in Kentucky or LA? Or would you just say that actually you just still feel the same, but you just try and, you know, live day by day with the grace of God, really?
Yeah. I think in ways, I think, first of all, I think there's always this lived in Black experience that you're always going to be aware that you're other and different, and I'm sure that as a fellow person of color, that you can probably relate to that. So I think there's always that. But it's interesting because I'm being from Louisville. Louisville is a city, like a medium-sized city, and it's predominantly Black and more Black and white. Those are the two largest races in the city. So I guess I'm used there people see Black people, and here, of course, you do have this melting pot. But I guess there's different ways. Like on campus at USC, a lot of times I did feel, sometimes I felt out of place, because I was definitely a minority on campus. And actually at USC, there are way more white students, way more Asian students, and way more Latino students.
Okay.
And you never know what people's, what people's perspectives are. So I do feel like there is kind of this burden that goes wherever, because I have been in some communities where I felt very welcome, in LA, and then other places where, I still feel like I stick out. Because the other thing about LA though is I feel like, whereas in Louisville, you're used to seeing Black people and everything, I feel like in LA, because you have so many different ethnicities, sometimes you have these enclaves and neighborhoods that are very, very, very homogenous.
Okay.
So when you step into them, you do stick out, and I feel like as a Black person, I'm always going to stick out more than anyone else that's different from that, from another ethnicity. I feel like a white person is going to stick out a little less than me. Whenever
unless they went to Ghana or Africa, in which case they'd be the minority.
Yeah. And when you say that, that's the only place, and maybe possibly in the Bahamas, that was the only place where I've ever felt that I was able to drop that burden, and where I was just Sherrick. I didn't think about race. I didn't think about being a certain type of Black person.
You could just breathe as a person and feel free. Yeah, and there was a freedom in that. So I hope I answered that question. Yeah, no, you have, and that's really important. I think first and foremost, as a human being, but as a daughter of Christ, we have freedom in Him. Sadly, we live in a world where there is oppression, and there are people who, don't value one another's lives equally. And I'm really sorry about that, because I'm sorry that, anyone has to live in that way. You know what I mean? That's not okay. But I am really proud of you for, pursuing acting, finding God again. And that's just a really amazing journey to be on. And, as much as there is human power, we know that the ultimate power, obviously, is God. And God is, for sure, putting light into the darkest corners and exposing what is broken and what is not okay and what is not right. There's so much pain, but there is so much goodness in the world. But if everyone is not being treated equally and fair, and is not loved in the same way, we have an issue. Do you know what I mean? And actually, I've probably learned more about history in the last 2 weeks than I have in my lifetime as a 36-year-old. So I just feel I feel really ignorant, because I feel like, oh my gosh, how do I not know this? But when you look at history overall, every country has blood on their hands, And what I loved is what you said about when you went to the protest, actually you were the minority, and actually there were more people from different ethnic backgrounds coming out, including from the white community coming out. And actually that has power to it, because I think for me, that shows that the younger generation particularly are much more, I don't know the word tolerant, but much more open and loving to just seeing people as human beings rather than a particular race. And it's important that we acknowledge people's culture and background and experiences, but it's also really important to acknowledge that people are just human beings, that we are all fallible, that we all have a brain and organs and a body that is made in God's image, that we are made in God's image. And I think that's really important. A lot of prejudice comes from just generations of my mum and dad taught me that. And actually it takes time for people to understand, actually, because I said this, I had this really open conversation on Instagram with one of my friends, Shamara, who's British Caribbean. So her grandparents are from the Caribbean, I think came over with the Windrush generation. And I said to her, I grew up, in a culture where I was taught I couldn't marry someone who was Black, white or Muslim. You know what I mean? And that was difficult, because you're kind of like, well, why do they think that way? And when you ask, well, why? And it's like, you just can't. There was no real answer. And it took for me it was only in 2017 actually. It took for me to go, hang on a second, because I've had friends. I've always had friends. I've always been in a multicultural environment, but it took for me to understand. I think as a grown woman making a choice about who I want to marry, and I went, hang on a second, do I believe that? And I went, no, I don't. I don't believe that. But it took for me to stop it with me to say, actually, you know, it's not what I believed, it's what was passed down. And that fear sometimes, we're like, if our parents say to you, don't do something, you're like, okay, I'm going to be respectful to my parents and I'm not going to do it. But because I lost my mum quite young, my mum was quite open-minded, you know, but our grandparents' generation, a little bit more, I'd say traditional with their thoughts and prejudice and discriminative, you know, and I think that's across all cultures. I don't think that's just the Asian culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like we're from Uganda originally, so you know my mum and my grandfather were born in Uganda. My grandmother was born in Kenya, but obviously my ancestral roots are India. So what's really interesting is that obviously they were in the time of Idi Amin when he kicked the Asians out of Uganda. So a part of me feels like I can't ask her the question because she's passed away, but actually is that where her prejudices came from, the fear that there was somebody who kicked them out, and that at that time there were people who were looted as well, and I think they were given, I can't remember if it's 30 or 90 days, they were given a very short period to go, right, basically grab your things and get out our country. So they came to the UK and, you know, were in a refugee camp. So I'm really proud to say I'm a daughter of a refugee, and when I think about Jesus, I'm like, well, I'm a daughter of another refugee. Do you know what I mean? Like this is so I think there's so many layers to all of this, and I think what I've found, and I don't know about you, is that we can't change the course of history, but we can write a new history for the generation to come. And I think we've all gotten so comfortable in just living life as it is, that actually now that this has all come to light, you know, every day we have the opportunity to write something better and to write something good, you know, not just for our own families and leaving legacies, but I always look forward to, I think particularly with this situation, you know, bringing God's kingdom back, because ultimately as Christians, that's what we're trying to do, is bring God's kingdom back, not build another worldly way, but build a godly way, which is loving and kind and generous and, you know, open-hearted, and just so much more grace and mercy and forgiveness. Reconciliation, transformation, all those good things that, you know, God's done in both of our lives. It's just, I just want to see more of that. Do you know what I mean? I want to see more people know that transforming love. No, thank you so much for like taking the time out to, you know, to chat and share your story. And I think, you know, if there's one piece of advice you would give to anyone who is searching for faith, what would you say?
I would say it's trusting God is hard work. Yeah. But it is the most beautiful and rewarding journey that you can possibly be on. Because there are so many times where I just say, I wish I knew God in this way. Sooner, you know, it's like, where would I be, you know, had I known God this way just a few years, you know, earlier, you know, or had I had this type of relationship, or what would God be doing, you know, through me in the world right now? So I would say, that it's to not be afraid of the decision of that leap, because, you know, I think with anything with faith, no matter what it is, you know, there's always fear of that unknown. And so, it's just to just leap in and trust that it's going to blow your mind, and know that it's still going to be a journey. Because if there's anything that I've learned over the last few years of my life, is that life is about the journey, not the destination, you know, and it's about who you're becoming and everything you're going through, and you can't take anything for granted. So I guess that's what I'd say most about faith.
I agree. Because it's absolutely, it's not about what you do, it's about who you become as a person. Ultimately, God cares about our character. You know, everything else is like, we'll just do it because it's what God's asked of us. But ultimately, if we just keep doing stuff but we never grow spiritually and grow, you know, and change the, I guess, if we don't transform as God's called us to transform, then, you know, we're kind of stuck with the old self rather than the new self of what God's trying to do. And I think it takes, like I said, it's hard work, because you have to be willing to be open to what God is asking of you. And I think that's the hardest part, because so many of us are control freaks. We want to hold on to stuff, don't we? And we want to, we want to be able to be in control of our life, because if we don't, then things might go wrong. But actually, you're right. Trusting and faith are the two of the key things, is that you have to literally take a deep breath and let go in every aspect of your life, and let God just completely embrace that for you and go, okay, Lord, whatever you're asking of me, I surrender it all to you. Do what you need to do.
I think one of the greatest joys that I've had is the conflict that I had with thinking that ministry and my career path as an actor were separate entities. And that has been such a great journey for me to go through, because it's revealed to me that we can't put God in a box, and that he has a lot bigger things that he wants to do for us and for the kingdom, and how he wants to use us than we can ever imagine. So however he's made you, with every interest, or passions, like I think we have to honor that and trust that, and trust that God can use those things, even if we don't see those things. Because I feel like sometimes we can put ourselves in a box as much as society and other people can put us in the box and say, this is how you should treat and serve God, and this is what you should do. And I remember I went through a process where I really struggled. I was like, well, I feel like I should be doing ministry, and maybe I should be doing this, but at the same time, it's like, I feel like I'm led to do this thing in the creative arts, and like, how do these things reconcile? And it's like, no, these things go together. Like, God, none of these things are separate for God.
No, and he's given you those gifts for a reason. He's given you the gift of acting for a reason, because he wants you to, God is a creator. You know what I mean? So you doing acting is not against what God's will. It's not against what God's asked of you. And not everybody, if we were all in church and, just doing ministry in church, well, we'd all be in a very different place, We're called to be on so many different front lines and sharing the gospel, and it's like, I think that's the thing. I think when people think about Christians sometimes, not everyone necessarily, but just that it's this religious way of life, and it's not. I think what people need to remember is that it's a relationship with God. Just like two humans get to know one another, it's the same thing. Like, you don't know everything about me, I don't know everything about you. And, actually it takes time to get to know people and understand their story, and understanding God and what he wants to do in our life. That's the whole life. That's a lifelong journey. So, you've got to commit to it, and you've got to put in the hard work, and also you've got to take a deep breath and let go of stuff and let God, take control.
Absolutely.
But I thank you so much for your time, Sherrick. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you, taking the time to speak with me and obviously share your journey. It's such an amazing testimony, and I keep praying God's protection over you, and hopefully we'll continue speaking.